And here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to episode 8 of season 14 of Sports Scene. Folks, this is the beauty of a virtual world. I'm coming at you live from New York. My name is Will Camardella. Coming from Illinois is Sam Reno. And coming from California is Sune Sangani. Welcome to the show, guys. How you guys doing?
Doing great. How you doing, Will?
Fantastic. Well, today is the funeral. USC loses their Elite 8 matchup against Gonzaga by a final score of 85-66. It's a disappointing end to a really strong tournament run for the Trojans. Sune, I'll start with you. What is your evaluation from a 1,000-foot angle of USC's basketball season this year?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and say that this was a terrible season. They made the Elite 8. They had a great postseason in March. But I think this has got to be a stepping stone for them. This will only be considered a success, in my opinion, if you can get more recruits to LA, get more players to LA, and keep continued success like this. I'm putting the pressure on Coach Andy Enfield. Listen, he had a great March. He had an excellent season. Yes, there were a little bit of downfalls here and there, but I think he came back, rebounded really nicely. Let's keep this up. I think you can easily convince prospects and high school players to come to LA. It's USC, it's LA. Who doesn't want to be here? But also, you've had back-to-back lottery picks. They had Evan Mobley, who, he's going to be a top 3 NBA pick at least. They had Onyeka Okongwu last year, who was a lottery pick. He's doing well in the NBA now. It's about time that I think USC should look to get this thing rolling a little bit. This is a great season, great stepping stone, but you have to get this season as a momentum for something else.
I would caution you a little bit there on stepping stone. This season is a massive success in the history of this USC program. You haven't made the Elite 8 in over almost 20 years now. Your program has only won more than 25 games, which you hit this year one other time. You had one season of the generational talent of Evan Mobley, and you turned it into this incredible run that maybe goes further if you don't run into what many consider the greatest college basketball team of all time. You handed Kansas their biggest tournament loss in history. This loss is this loss isn't that big of a deal. You lost by a ton to a great team. You had an amazing season, and we run it back next year. But I think you can't judge and you can't project next season's based off the tournament success. You have to be careful with that, right? Because the tournament is so volatile. You had a nice little 3-game winning streak, but you can't let that be the barometer for seasons to come, especially when it comes to important decisions like the hiring and firing of Andy Enfield.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm not arguing whether they should hire or fire Andy Enfield, and I'm not arguing whether they had a good season or not. All I'm saying is this. For me to write this off as a complete success for this story, this Cinderella story for this USC season, I think that you need to capitalize off of it. No doubt, Andy Enfield should be back. But you can also put the pressure on him and say, hey, come on, let's get more. Let's get more recruits. It is USC. We played in the Pac-12. We saw how well the Pac-12 did. So the argument that Pac-12 now is not a great it's not a competitive division to play in, and I would rather go to the SEC or the ACC where the level of basketball is higher. I think Andy Enfield can easily push that out. I'm not saying that Andy Enfield, should not be here next year. All I'm saying is, great season, Andy Enfield. I want to be a little greedy. I want more.
What you look at the recruiting class coming in, 11th ranked nationally, first in the Pac-12. We already got multiple 4-stars. What more do you want the guy to do already and show you in recruiting? We're putting out top 10 talents. He's bringing more in, and they've had the best season arguably in program history this year.
Point taken, yeah. But let's see year after year after year. I think this year USC, one of the key things was the transfers, right? It was a story of the season, really. So many success stories in that transfer portal. I don't know if that's a successful model if you want, again, year after year after year. I don't know if that's as successful of a model to depend on if you want to be successful. I'm talking about USC trying to get into that upper echelon of basketball. I mentioned the Pac-12. They can easily be one of the best teams in the Pac-12 year after year, and they have been ever since Andy Enfield has been here. But now let's get into the upper echelon of college basketball world.
Well, let me ask you this, Sam, because obviously Sune talks about an upper echelon. If you're talking about recruiting, which is sort of the way he's framing this, obviously the recruiting class next year is what it is. But if you're looking at this season sort of as a milestone for the future, is the image of USC basketball from a recruiting standpoint going to be a team that had some great wins in this tournament, or a team that couldn't compete with that quote unquote upper echelon when you took on a team in Gonzaga?
Well, I don't think the loss to Gonzaga is a massive issue, right? Because Kansas isn't going to hurt in recruits because they lost by 30 plus to USC, right? Duke's not going to hurt in recruits. Kentucky's not going to hurt by missing the tournament this season, right? It's a year after year, almost regular season success. I mean, Virginia has been bounced in the first round 2 of the last 3 tournaments, and they won a national title, right? You build your foundation on how your program performs on a consistent basis on, metrics that show your regular season performance, and the tournament. It's just volatile. Whatever happens in the tournament is the gravy. But if you don't get that tournament success, that doesn't mean things need to change, right? And USC has never been an upper echelon program. They made 2 Final Fours. Like, I think a lot of programs run into problems across both revenue sports, football and basketball, trying to push themselves into this next stratosphere when their program really doesn't have a history of being there. We've seen that with Nebraska and Arizona State firing coaches in football that have gotten them perpetual success. We've seen this across the board. Indiana trying to hire Brad Stevens or Ohio State's coach away from them, right? If you think you're better than you are, it can leave you to fall on your face more often than not.
But I will argue the reason why Duke and Kentucky and Virginia and the teams you stated, other teams, the reason why they're not going to bleed as much is because they've done it at a consistent level year after year. We don't think of Kansas and say, oh, they're not a great basketball program. We look at Kansas and we're like, oh my God, they're amazing. That's the reason why they're not going to get hurt as much from this loss. Because year after year, they're going to be in a March Madness tournament. They're going to be there in contention for the national championship. Same thing with North Carolina, Kentucky, and Duke. I mean, all 3 of them had off years this year. But hey, North Carolina was still in there. Duke had a chance. They just had some COVID issues. So USC, I think, to answer your question, Will, to get into that upper echelon, I'm just talking about consistency, to do it year after year after year.
So, Sam, what do you think is sustainable about what USC did this year? What does this program learn from this year to apply to future winning?
I think just the ability. Now, you've done this 2 years in a row now of bringing in, one and done talents like Okongwu, like Mobley, and you're going to bring in multiple 4-stars to cycle those in with the experience of transfers. You're bringing along other guys. The ability to sort of then feel to coach a team together of sort of almost moving parts, right, to these 20-plus win seasons. And I think you've got a foundation of tournament success. And I think trying to hold them to a standard that is the Elite Eight, because USC is not one of the best 8 teams in the country this year. I think we can all firmly agree on that. So to hold them to sort of this Elite Eight standard, I think puts too much pressure on a program that's not ready to hold it yet, right? You got to take baby steps and slowly get there. I don't think you can just take this 1 year and think, okay, well, now next year's got to be Final Four. We've got to be pushing these numbers every single season. I think that's dangerous for the health of the program long term.
Well, Sine, let me ask you this as well. I mean, Sam talks about one and dones. I mean, you got Evan Mobley here this year without an Elite Eight run. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. Hasn't head coach Andy Enfield already proven he can make USC a very attractive destination for top flight high school prospects?
Absolutely, he has. And that shouldn't mean that he should just stop and not do that. I mean, he's proven everything in the coaching field. I think he's got to do it next year, the year after, in order for this to really be, in order for him to really be considered that type of coach. I mean, we've seen Oregon do this as well. We've seen Colorado; they've had some nice prospects. Arizona, great prospects, even though they had a little bit of issues with recruiting. But this is a type of direction you want USC basketball to head into, and it's a great direction. And there's definitely room for optimism. But I think that in terms of recruiting, back-to-back years is great. I think you got to keep that up.
But your recruiting brand, I don't think is built off of tournament success. When you look at Ben Simmons, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, DeAndre Ayton, none of these teams even made the second weekend when they were in college. Kids aren't going to these schools to win national titles, right? They want to go to college to improve their lottery stock and get drafted high. And I think USC is sort of proving that you can come here and get that high lottery pick if you think you deserve it coming out of high school. And that's what's important about recruiting those top level talents that we talk about.
Well, the season is over for USC, but this tournament, in many ways, is just getting started. We have our Final Four set going into Saturday. It will be Houston against Baylor in the early game, and then UCLA, after a big upset over Michigan, will take on Gonzaga in the late game. Guys, Gonzaga's 30-0. Who are you taking as we're down to the Final Four, the Zags or the field?
Will, give me the field, all right? We had 38 and done. This hasn't happened in over 30 years, a team going undefeated in the national championship. And arguably, that national title game will be their biggest test, and that's a recipe for disaster. You do not want that toughest game of the season to come when everything's tight. Gonzaga, it's all the talk going into that game is going to be they're undefeated. They're 31-0. Can they do what nobody's done since Indiana, right? That's everything in their ear is going to be about this perfect season. And it's going to be all to play for either Houston or Baylor, who come at this with opposite sides, right? You have Houston, who has incredible depth in defensive talent, and you have Baylor, who has incredible depth in offensive talent, right? And either one of those, I think, spell trouble for the Zags. Houston leads the country in opponent field goals made per game. 19 shots. Opponents are making 19 shots against the Cougars this season. They're leading in opponent field goal percentage at just 37%. They're second in total points allowed at 59. This is a defensive juggernaut that could spell trouble for them. The offensive force that is Gonzaga. And Baylor's the same with their depth in scoring and leading the nation in three-point percentage with guys like Teague, Mitchell, and Butler. There's just a lot of depth and a lot of talent on opposite sides of the floor.
You know, I think super teams have gotten a lot of headlines, not in terms of college basketball, but professionally. But I won't get to that. I think Gonzaga arguably is a super team in college basketball. To get Jalen Suggs on this roster that was already good, and they also got a couple of transfers that were really good. Their six-man, their bench is amazing. I mean, I'm looking at this roster right now. Drew Timme, Suggs, Kispert. I mean, guys, Kispert didn't even play his A game yesterday against USC, and they still were able to dominate. I understand Baylor and Houston are both great defensive teams, but how many players can you have? Because they have so many different options. They have bench coming off scoring coming off the bench, and they also have their starting lineup, which is so loaded. I'm just not sure that Baylor or Houston is going to be able to have an answer defensively because Gonzaga has so many different options.
Well, I mean, yeah, Baylor can score with them too. You talk about scoring. Baylor's top 10 in points and assists, and they're top 10 in steals created if you want to go defensive end, right? They've got three guys averaging over 14 points, and the guys I mentioned in Teague, Butler, and Mitchell, right? They're an offensive juggernaut as well, and they hit threes. They're top 15 in the country in threes made per game on the best percentage. Like, if there's an offensive team built to beat Gonzaga, it's Baylor. And if Kispert didn't have his A game against USC, maybe if it's that Houston defense, what can they do to multiple guys, right? We saw Giroux in that Sweet 16 matchup, in the second-round matchup, playing on that bad hip, just going to war for those Cougs. They battle for Kelvin Sampson on the defensive end, and it's impressive. 1 through even 8, they defend all over the place, and they have an All-American talent in Quentin Grimes, who's hit big shots for them too, and hasn't played his best basketball yet. There's some dangerous teams waiting in the wings to take down the Zags.
Oh, I hear you. They look really scary, but at the end of the day, the other problem I have with these two teams is they've had a little bit of a tough time to get to this point. We saw even last in Elite 8, Baylor didn't have a smooth ride to Arkansas. Arkansas made it a little bit of a game.
Exactly. They're battle tested. They're battle tested. That's what you want. You want these teams having this experience in these close games, right? Gonzaga's going to get to this title game, arguably, assuming they dispatch of UCLA. They will have played one game within double digits. One game. 30 of their 31 games will be double-digit plus wins. They don't have experience trying to close out these tight games against these top-level teams that, you know, Baylor or Houston are going to have their entire road to the tournament. You can argue about Houston's path being all double-digit seeds. Well, guess what? It was too tough for Illinois. It was too tough for West Virginia. And it was too tough for Oklahoma State. So these teams are battle-tested, and they're ready to go in a way that Gonzaga just isn't. And I don't trust it in a one-game playoff. Like, that atmosphere in the national title game, it's one game for everything. And when you don't have that test yet, it's going to be tough for Gonzaga.
Well, Sam, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I disagree. I mean, you have Mark Few, who's been there. I mean, he was just experience on that team. And if you're going to come at Gonzaga for not being battle tested, I feel like their coaching staff has been there. They've been in a scenario like this before. Their players are experienced enough.
They've been in one title game and they blew it away on an out-of-bounds play.
But they have a ring on their finger, don't they?
They have no national championships. Gonzaga's made one Final Four in their history, and they've played in that one title game that they got dispatched to North Carolina. They had the game in their hands and should have put it away, and Mark Few and that staff couldn't get it done.
I still feel like his postseason record it speaks for itself. I mean, he's been unbelievable. Mark Few is he's a great coach. I have faith and trust in him. But go ahead. I didn't know I cut you off.
Yeah, no, Sam, I think there's just one thing to keep in mind here. You talk about battle-tested. I don't know how you're tested for the way Gonzaga plays, the way they pass, the way they're able to operate on offense. They're not relying on the three-pointer. They're not just a team that's going to go cold. The pressure they put on you on defense is like nothing I've ever seen in this tournament. You know, is it fair to say that any team is ready for what Gonzaga is going to bring them?
No, but is Gonzaga ready for the defensive effort that Houston's going to play? Nobody's played a team as good defensively as Houston. Gonzaga has not faced that yet. And let's not act like USC is some offensive juggernaut, right? Their best offensive player is a post scorer. That doesn't prepare you for Baylor or Houston and what they're going to bring at you, right? USC doesn't score very well. They have 2 double-digit scorers. And Baylor's got 3 dudes north of 14. Houston's got 3 guys in double figures, right? The scoring output is just massively different than anything Gonzaga's faced this year. And, I mean, you can say a Virginia or a Kansas win, but so many teams have dispatched of them as well. So I think that Baylor or Houston's going to bring something that Gonzaga hasn't seen all year. And with the amount of pressure that's going to be on that undefeated national champion surrounding them, I think they crumble under it against a team that's ready to go get them.
I will say one thing, though, about USC. They're not an offensive juggernaut. No, they are really, really good defending, and Gonzaga basically had their way with them. USC, the tallest team in this entire tournament, was unable to block a shot. They were out-rebounded by more than 10. That never happens.
Yeah, USC is good defensively, but let's not act like they've been this stalwart in big games all year. I mean, Ian Martinez came off the bench for Utah in the Pac-12 tournament and poured in 19, and if he doesn't foul out in the first overtime, USC goes home in the quarterfinals of the Pac-12 tournament, right? Alfonso Plummer and Timmy Martin, they're ridiculous. Timmy Allen scored 21 points. This Utah team put them through the washers. So I don't think that USC as a defensive juggernaut exactly works here either, because they've faltered against much worse offenses than Gonzaga.
But also, you have to consider the fact that USC was on fire. We always talk about how March is about momentum and getting hot at the right time. USC scored more than 80 in all 3 of their games, I believe. And they were on a good offense. I know they're not the best offensive team. We didn't see anything great out of them in the regular season, but they were shooting pretty nicely in March. And also, Gonzaga averages 92 points. That's a lot to ask for.
Baylor scores 83. I mean, we're in the same ballpark here, right? Baylor averages 83 points a game. Gonzaga averages 92, but Baylor's top 10 in steals, right? Baylor plays defense as well. And so I think they're going to score up there with them, and it's going to be a close game. And when it comes down to it, do we trust Gonzaga to make the plays in a close game that none of them have had to make this year? Let's be honest.
I think that the start, to me, I think March Madness is a tournament of stars. I think Gonzaga has 3, and I hear you, Baylor does too. But I think Gonzaga has 3 top-level scorers. And that is just too tough of a task for me to ask of Baylor or Houston. And also, I'll say this. Baylor in that Final Four game, Baylor and Houston, that's going to be a tough game. That's going to be a game. That's a game where you're going to be tired. It's going to take you time to recover after that, because you know Houston's not going to back off, and you know Baylor's not going to back off. They're going to go mano a mano, and that's going to be a tough game. Gonzaga, not so much. They're going to have. I mean, I don't want to speak too soon here, but UCLA is not as tough of a matchup. So Baylor and Houston, whoever makes it out of that, they're going to be tired after that game.
It didn't work well for. Go ahead.
I'll ask you one more thing, Sam, real quick. I mean, you've talked a lot about Baylor and Houston today, and Sinead just brought it up. Do you give UCLA any chance to challenge the Zags?
Not entirely, no. Gonzaga is way too much for UCLA. I think UCLA's had a great run, let's be honest, but they don't match the talent level that Gonzaga has. Gonzaga's going to be ready for that game. Mark Few's going to get them up, and I think they're not going to look ahead to a national title game. I think they'll dispatch with them relatively easily. And back to Sune's point about being tired after that game, Virginia and Auburn 2 years ago in 2019 played a battle. They needed all 3 of those free throws at the end of the game to take out Auburn, and Texas Tech kind of cruised through Michigan State, and it didn't matter. Virginia won the game, right? So I think
barely.
But who took home the hardware? Who's has that?
Barely. They got very lucky. You talk about luck. They got very lucky.
That trophy in that trophy case in Charlottesville doesn't say barely. It says champion on it, and Texas Tech doesn't have one.
So it matters when Gonzaga plays, but it doesn't matter when Virginia plays?
I'm saying all year. You can the tough game before doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. I'm saying all year the experience of guys like Suggs late in the game. I don't know if I trust him to make those plays.
Well, I think I disagree, but we'll see.
Well, we'll transition now from the hardwood to the gridiron. Spring practices have begun for the USC Trojans last Monday. They're getting ready for the upcoming full season. And Sine, you have a very hot take about what USC can do this year.
Yeah, I'm coming out swinging, guys. Keaton Slovis will break the all-time USC touchdown record with 40 or more touchdowns. He needs to pass 40 to pass Matt Barkley and Cody Kessler, who had 39 each in 2011, 2014, respectively. They're both tied for first place. I'm saying Keaton Slovis will get to 40 this year. Listen, third year in the system, third year junior quarterback. Brew McCoy is coming back, former five-star recruit. When I think of great quarterbacks, when I think of good college quarterbacks, I look at their mechanics and I look at their past success. Keaton Slovis has worked and worked and worked. He's gotten more reps with Graham Harrell, the offensive coordinator for USC. He's also trying to form a bonding relationship with spring practices. They're going on currently at USC. He's trying to regain that confidence back. Last year, he didn't look as sharp, but that's because he had some issues with his elbow and shoulder. But also, the best thing I know about Keaton Slovis is that he knew he didn't look sharp. It's really easy to look at that USC season, the season he had last year, and say that, oh my God, I had a great season, guys. We're going to win the Pac-12. It's going to be easy. No, he's not satisfied with the season. He's ready to bring it on. And I think Keaton Slovis has a really good shot. I think he's going to do it, actually. 40 touchdowns in 2021.
Does that not concern you, though, that he's acknowledging that to the LA Times? I mean, you always want your guys to be confident, right? And I'm not saying he has to come out and say, I balled out last year. But to come out and publicly tell the LA Times, man, that was the first time in my career I just really didn't feel it. I really didn't feel confident. That scares me. That's concerning, right? You don't want your quarterback, your guy who's top 10 in the Heisman odds for next year. You don't want him saying that to the LA Times. When we talk about touchdown numbers, let's not use 2020 since shoulder, elbow, you want to talk about how weird season. Let's go to 2019. He had 6 games where he threw for more than 2 touchdowns and 6 games where he threw for 2 or less touchdowns. That tipping point has to get to about 3 if he wants to even approach 40, if he even wants to get close, right? Justin Fields hit 41 in one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen from a college quarterback. So to set the standard at 40 for Keaton Slovis, I think is unfair to him. I think it's unfair to the program, right? We're looking for a bounce-back season from Slovis where you can lead them to maybe a Pac-12 title game. I think we'll be okay with that. But to put the bar really high, I think is unfair to a lot of people involved.
Well, I mean, I don't understand the point about telling LA Times that you were not in the. I mean, he's not in the wrong, but he was a little bit messed up. I would like that out of my quarterback. I like it when you admit you make mistakes and you know the plan to get better. I mean, he's worked tirelessly. He played but he threw in the pro day. He looked pretty well. I mean, NFL scouts, I'm sure, were impressed. I would want my quarterback to admit when he made flaws. I don't want him to be Mr. Perfect and sit up there and say, oh, I had a great season last year, guys.
I'm not saying he has to say he has a great season. I'm just saying I don't want him admitting to the LA Times that he's lost his confidence, right?
What's wrong with that?
And if you talk about pro day too, and what's wrong with admitting he's lost confidence? Keep that you want your quarterback to be your rock, right? That's the image of your team. And the image of USC has been this team that's been slightly short of expectations and that's always just slightly not had it. And so when then your quarterback is going to your city's biggest media outlet and saying he also doesn't have it, that's a problem for your program, right? That just keeps the narrative pumping through Clay Helton, through USC football, that they continually underperformed every season. And you talk about pro day, some of those guys he's throwing the ball to in the pro day, the last 2 seasons, he's had 6 receivers, right? 3 of them caught for more than 900 yards 2 years ago. And if we use that number to 400 for the shortened season last year, it's 3 again, right? St. Brown, gone. Pittman, gone. Vaughn's gone. A lot of wide receiver production is gone to expect him to break a record number of touchdowns next season.
I'm glad you brought that up because Cody Kessler in this third. First of all, there's a similarity between Barkley and Kessler when they broke the records. Both of them, third year in the system. Okay, that's a minor point. Whatever, we'll let that go. First year for Matt Barkley, 2011, I believe it was. He had Marquise Lee and Robert Woods. Marquise Lee was a freshman. Robert Woods didn't play that much. He was a sophomore. We can consider them both as new receivers. second quarterback, Cody Kessler. Nelson Aguilar, I know, great receiver, first-round receiver, but he was also new. Juju Smith-Schuster, new, also played limited snaps. I don't think you can make the argument that receivers is not having a change of receivers is a problem. I mean, yeah, sure, on the face value it does seem like that, but you have to give the Trojans the benefit of the doubt that they're gonna get together, they're gonna build their chemistry. Spring practice is going on right now, as I said, but we've seen it in the past. I mean, Matt Barkley and Cody Kessler were playing with new guys when they broke the record.
Well, so Nate, let me ask you this, because you talk about the confidence piece in that LA Times article. He also goes in to say that last year he was sacrificing his accuracy and his arm strength because of the elbow injury. Well, the problem is, in that Oregon championship game, he did not play very well. He had 3 interceptions, and he injures his arm again at the end of the game. Is there any concern for you that that injury may continue to linger and cause some of those same problems again?
You know, I mean, a little bit. Anytime a quarterback gets a little bit injury prone, yeah. But I mean, let's be honest. I think it was a mechanics problem for Slovis. Like, he himself admitted that he was overthrowing. He missed a little bit of throws. Footwork, even I could tell. I'm not a football guru by any chance. Even I could tell the footwork was a little bit off. The balance was a little bit off in that pocket. And he's got to work on those things. And he knows that. He admitted that in the LA Times article himself, which, again, I think there's nothing wrong in admitting that you were in the wrong and you're trying to improve. He's trying to improve. He knows that. Now, he might have had a little bit of injury last year, but last year was also an anomaly, guys. I mean, COVID season, I don't know what his practice situation was like. Elbow soreness usually tends to or elbow problems usually tends to maybe not practicing as much, not getting as many reps in, but he didn't have the opportunity to. I mean, we saw it fires, COVID, canceled practices. It was a year that you had to navigate through. So maybe that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a year like that for everyone, right? And we had guys break out all over the place. We had Sam Howell play incredible at North Carolina, right? I mean, Lawrence still played incredible. Mac Jones came out of the woodwork to have an incredible season, right? So I think all these teams were dealing with this. And so to say that was maybe the reason Slovis struggled, I think is a bit of a stretch. And also, I mean, the receiver production, to go back to that, I mean, we have the hindsight of knowing that guys like Juju and Marquise Lee and Robert Woods are big-time talents, right? Are we sure Drake London is that? Are we sure Brew McCoy is that? We're making a big step here to assume that the talent level of those guys is the same as the returning guys this season, right?
And that's fair, but I think Drake London had an unbelievable season last year. I thought he did a really nice job filling in as that number 2 receiver. I expect him to take a step up. Brew McCoy, he's getting his win back. It was his, I think, first year. He's a redshirt sophomore now, so he's gonna get back. He's a 5-star recruit. You can tell he's so athletically gifted. That I expect him also. But USC is just good at producing receivers. We're a wide receiver U, baby. We know how to get receivers onto the NFL and football field on Sundays. I'm not worried about that. And also, to the point for the Trevor Lawrence and all those guys dominating. That's my point. Pac-12 was different. The USC players had to plead to play their season. USC had to write
the Big Ten. And Michael Penix had a breakout season.
They were
Justin
really
Fields
late.
is going to go top overall. He's going to be a top 5 pick. The Big Ten had to plead to get their season back, and we saw multiple quarterbacks have great seasons. Graham Mertz kind of emerged for Wisconsin when they were actually playing games, right? So, I mean, to say because they had to plead for their season, there were many quarterbacks that broke out across the country, including the Big Ten, including the MAC conference even. You had guys at Toledo. They had to play for their season. They got a limited amount of games, and they still were able to break through. So I don't think that's the reason.
Let me point one more thing out as well. Obviously, we talk about the receivers, and losing Amon-Ra St. Brown is important. That's a great security blanket for him. It's somebody you can throw the fades to in the end zone. That's going to boost your touchdown number. But Keaton Slovis is losing somebody else this year, the quarterback's actual best friend, your stud left tackle in Elijah Vera Tucker. If there's going to be more pressure on the quarterback this year, couldn't that continue to disrupt him, especially somebody admittedly dealing with confidence issues?
I'll say this too. Same pattern. Third year, we had the same issue. New offensive line sliding in. Max Turk, center. Also, they lost Matt Khalil, I believe, too, in Barkley's year. I mean, the thing with USC is this is something you can't deny, and I give coaching staff so much credit. They know how to get their players ready. Elijah Vera Tucker was new like two or 3 years ago too. He did an excellent job when he slid in that and played a couple snaps in a couple games. Like, he was really good. These USC players are ready, and you have to give the coaches the benefit of doubt, considering their body of work in the past. But also, I want to go back to that point of the Big Ten. I'm not going to sit here and say Justin Fields had an amazing season. There were games where we saw him also have same issues and problems against Northwestern in that championship. There were times where he struggled too. Same thing with Mertz. Every single quarterback this year, I'm not going to say every single one, but like 99% of them did have struggles. And it was because this was a season of being an outlier. You did not have practices. You had to really adjust on the fly.
Well, that's unfortunately all the time we had. Great debate today. Guys, there's not going to be a show next week. We will be back 2 weeks from now, same time, same place. You want to follow us on all our social media channels at Ann Media Sports, AAN Media Sports. Thank you all, guys, for tuning in. I'm Will Camardella, signing off.